Welcome to A Taste of AZ podcast. Before we get into today's episode, we want to announce that A Taste of AZ magazine will be switching to a paid subscription starting on January 1st, 2024. Until then, you can visit us at atasteofaz.com/subscribe and name your price for the entire 2024 magazine year. You'll get 4 issues for whatever price you decide, and they will each arrive at the beginning of the quarter. With that said, don't forget to subscribe to our email newsletter, and let's jump into today's episode.
Gabe, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, glad to be back. Thanks.
You were one of our original guests, I believe.
Right? That's you know what, a place of honor.
It is. Yes, it is. For us as well. For us as well, man. So we are here, as you can see on the back wall. D-Lo. Big shout out to D-Lo for
the one, the only.
Yeah, if you couldn't see it. So I was meeting up with
subtle
D-Lo.
though, I think.
Yeah.
That's D-Lo's thing. It's subtle,
it is.
right?
He's a very subtle guy, for sure. No, I was meeting up with him anyways. We meet up every, once a month or once every couple of months just to, catch up and shoot the shit. And I was like, people either they're like, oh, I know D-Lo. We're like, yeah, who's D-Lo? But 9 out of 10 times in this industry, they're like, oh, yeah, I know D-Lo.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I asked you, I'm like, hey, you good? You're like, yeah, I know D-Lo. So hopefully that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. It is. A huge supporter of everything that Local First does and just, everybody in the restaurant industry. And an all-around great person.
He really is.
Yeah.
He really is. The amount of energy he has. And it kind of explains. I mean, when you're drinking that, you had some of this coffee too, right? This is. He's like, I hope it's not. Hope it's okay for you. I'm like, you mean like too strong? He's like, we're too weak. I'm like, who calls that too weak?
No, that's beautiful.
D-Lo calls that too weak, right? It's a great coffee. And this one is from Psycho Steve Presents from.
That's right.
Was that Rebel Lounge?
Rebel Lounge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember when Rebel Lounge had Reap and Soak coffee?
Yes.
In there? During the pandemic?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things. That's right by our house. And so we used to walk the dog up there and get fancy coffee and support them. But
it was a cool place, the way they had it. Yeah.
They still operate Driftwood Coffee, which is in Peoria, which is equally cool, but quite far away from my house.
Yeah, that is quite a far away.
Yeah.
And is it crazy that you can live in the same city, quote unquote, and it's like, dude, that's like a hour and a half drive. What? How?
That's right.
That's
right.
Yeah. My in-laws live in Surprise, I think northwest Surprise. And they're like, oh, yeah, where's that place looks cool. Like, where's Queen Creek Olive Mill? Well, you want to get a hotel.
Right.
It's way down there.
Yeah.
But Reap and Sow, actually, it was funny. I went in on their very last day.
Yeah.
I dropped off some magazines, got some coffee.
Yeah, I was in there on their last day.
Were you really?
Yeah.
Oh, we probably crossed paths.
Probably.
Were you wearing like a disguise?
Big Groucho Marx nose and a mustache.
Yeah. Damn, I did see you. I think I have a picture of you somewhere. But no, that's cool to hear that they're still rocking it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Gabe, thanks for once again joining the show. I think maybe your third appearance. You were on early when we were still doing Zooms.
Yep.
But then you were on for the Local First Expo last year.
Yep.
You were a quick guest.
Yep.
During the chaos of that expo.
Yeah.
You made the time to talk with us, man. So thank you.
Yeah, like I said, happy to do it. Glad to be back, and really appreciate what you guys are doing for the food and beverage scene.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm doing some damage control right now, right? Because of all the years of eating and drinking, I'm like, okay, I get a lot of side views on the camera. I'm like, that is not the most appealing side of me. So that's something D-Lo helps with too, right?
Sure.
D-Lo's a very healthy guy, and he was showing me like the food he eats, and he's like, oh yeah, I had a half pound of what was it, ground turkey? I'm like, oh, that just sounds horrible. Like, is there like melted cheese and sour cream on it too? I could do that.
Right. Is that on top of nachos?
Yeah, exactly. Nope, just straight up. Yeah, straight up drain off all of the juices. I'm like, what? No, he didn't say that. But anyways, Gabe, you are with Local First.
I am.
What is your role with Local First Arizona?
Sure. I'm the director of food entrepreneurship for Local First Arizona, which broadly means that I help small and startup food businesses gain access to tools to scale and grow their business, and help them with technical assistance of all sorts. And most notably, we operate a network of community kitchens, which gives them a physical space to either begin, grow, or scale their operation.
Okay. And meaning like, I've seen especially at the expo, the Good Food Expo, you've got a lot of the people that you work with.
Sure.
But from the girl who makes the what is the I can't remember the name of it now. It's like the cabbage that's like kind of pickled.
Oh, the Chow Chow.
Chow Chow. Yeah. She was awesome.
Yeah, Coreless.
Coreless, yes.
Yeah.
But that's a small operation, right? Like
It's
not like a big, she doesn't have like a production line. She doesn't have like, she's got this great product.
Yeah, so Coreless is an example of a business that began in our Mesa incubator, and we worked with her for 2 years. And as she scaled and grew her business, her goal was to continue to sell at farmers markets and then ultimately to get into grocery stores, which she was able to do.
Nice.
You can now get her product at AJ's Fine Foods. So she supplies, I think, I believe that there's 6 AJs in the Valley, maybe 8.
Okay.
Anyway, she supplies all the AJs in the Valley, and she actually is working with a co-packer who's taken her recipe and her product specifications, and now they make it and assemble it, and then she's doing the sales and the delivery of that product.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like the face. She's the face.
She's the face, right,
Yeah.
right. And so what we find with most of the small businesses that we work with is the first thing is folks want to connect with the person.
Yeah.
And so the line that I use all the time is the first thing that a customer is going to buy from you is your story. Yeah. And so if I'm in a grocery store and I'm looking at, on my grocery list is salsa, it's a coin flip, right?
Sure.
In a farmer's market, there might also be 3 or 4 salsa vendors. And again, like unless I have a specific reason to be a patron of one business or another, it's a toss-up. And so connecting with that person on a human level is kind of the first thing. And Coreless from Everlicious, her story is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And people love her, and then of course your product has to be delicious,
for sure,
right?
Yeah.
Like nobody's like, you're a great person, but you've got crummy food, right?
Yeah, yeah,
like nobody
exactly.
wants that, right?
Yeah.
But once they taste it, then the sale's made for sure.
And actually she makes other products too. I think it was like a grape jelly that she gave me, a blueberry jelly.
Yeah, she has a blueberry jam. She has a tropical jam, a fig jam that is really fantastic, like on a cheese board.
Yeah.
I did at Christmas time last year. We took her fig jam and a brie and wrapped it in puff pastry and baked it and did it as an appetizer for Christmas Eve, and it was
nice.
It was all right. Yeah. we were okay that day.
I saw your eyes. You were remembering. I was like, that day, the dreams segment starts to play. The Chow Chow was just the story of it, right? Like she was telling me the story of it, and then you try it, and you're like, wow. And she's like, yeah, Gabe always has to make sure that I keep some for him. And I think you came through and you were like, grabbed your allotment, and
she puts it aside for me. Yeah. Chow Chow is a condiment popular in the South, and I lived in Savannah, Georgia for a long time, and so it's kind of a cross between sauerkraut and relish and pickles, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's cabbage and hers is carrots and kind of sweet, kind of sour. It's really fantastic, like on grilled sausages or I eat it right out of the jar because I'm a lunatic.
I do too. That's what I did too. I don't think I put on anything. I just ate it.
A fork and just sure.
But the story she told about how because it was basically made from like leftover stuff, right? Yeah. Like you would people would make this dish or this dish, and then they just had a bunch of random stuff or stuff in the garden need to be picked, and they didn't have anything to do with it, and so they made this.
Yeah, a little bit of salt, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of vinegar.
Yeah,
you just let everything kind of sit. Absolutely.
And I liked that it was because I like sauerkraut a lot. But I liked that it wasn't quite as tart as sauerkraut. Like it was or sour, I guess right. It was Coreless. Nice work with that. So I hope I get to see her again this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the expo.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's a perfect example of what it sounds like. That's what Local First does, right? Like Coreless by herself, like she might have a great product and she has a great story, but how do you grow that? Right?
Yeah, how do you amplify? Yeah,
and that's what Local First does.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So in these kitchens that we have, these community kitchens, and we've got 3 now. We're working on a 4th. We got one in Mesa, one in Maryvale, one in South Phoenix. We're working with people who, when they come to us, they're confident in their product.
Okay,
which is really phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of years working in culinary schools and teaching people how to cook.
Yeah.
When they come to us now, they don't they don't need that.
Yeah.
Which when I started at Local First was frankly a blow to my precious little ego because nobody wanted my wonderful opinion about their thing, right? Like they know that their Chow Chow's good or their tamales are good or their masa is right on. The thing that they need help with is probably I call it the less sexy parts of owning a food business, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's a profit and loss statement? How does that work? What should food cost percentage be? How do I tell that story in person at a farmer's market? But also, how do I tell that story in the digital space to create, Instagram followers? And how do I then, once I've got 1,000 Instagram followers, convert that into sales? And so those are the types of technical assistance pieces that we help businesses with in order to scale their thing.
Yeah.
And all of it is with an eye of making the economy better on a localized scale. We believe that the economy works best when entrepreneurs do entrepreneurial things.
Yeah.
And so when they show up in one of our kitchens and apply to be in that program, like I said, they've got their product is good.
Yeah.
Without fail, it's the other things that we help with, and that's where the success stories come in, like Coreless.
Yeah. That it made me think of. I mean, I'm not a huge sports fan, but I grew up playing sports and I know enough about it. But it's almost like sports in the sense of you've got the talent, right? You've come here, you've got a scholarship, you've got the talent, or like a NFL rookie, right? You've got the talent. That's obvious, right? Now, how do you manage? Like, how do you deal with all of the other stuff, right? With I don't know if that was a good analogy, but if Coreless is a sports fan, she would appreciate that. It's like, I'm like an LeBron a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would say that Coreless is absolutely like a LeBron.
Yeah, the LeBron of Chow Chow.
That's right.
That needs to be a shirt, Coreless, if you're listening to this.
Yeah.
But no, that's great, right? Because you think, I think that our assumption a lot of times is that, okay, make a great product and the rest takes care of itself.
Right.
That's not the case, right? I'm sure there's been plenty of businesses and products that have failed because they just didn't know how to execute. Right.
And so one of the barriers that we remove is, first of all, the physical space, which is what the community kitchens are all about. But like I said, also then in addition to that, it's not just here's a kitchen that is the least expensive in the valley, right? That's the hook that gets them interested.
Yeah.
I think the thing that continues to build a program that is worthwhile is that piece of education and mentorship. And myself and everybody on my team, like we've done, everything that there is to do in a restaurant, from own a food truck or a bakery to run social media for restaurants, to be an executive chef, to scrub dishes and mop floors, right?
Yeah.
The super unglamorous things of owning a restaurant.
Yeah.
So we've done all of that, and we leverage that experience in order to help them grow.
Sure. Yeah. And so how do people, like let's say that I've got this really great hot sauce and I'm like, okay, I need to get this to the next level. I've got great feedback. Someone's like, hey, you should reach out to Local First.
Sure.
How does that work once that happens?
That's a great question. So the first thing that they do is they probably check out our website, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, right? And there's a whole bunch of information there. It's goodfoodfinder.com. There is a link to apply to the community kitchens on that website. And we collect all the applications and we do interviews quarterly for the available spaces that we have. So currently we've got 3 kitchens. We're incubating just about 70 businesses across those 3 properties.
Okay.
As I mentioned, we're working on a 4th, and it's a 2-year program. So a business will work with us for 2 years, and the point of that 2-year program is to ask them from the beginning, like, where's their business now, where they want it to be, and what can we do, and how can we leverage the Local First network and our expertise to get them from where they are to that end point.
Okay.
So anyway, we interview them. They're accepted into the kitchen, and then the first piece of the puzzle is to help them navigate the permitting process, which it's complex.
Yeah.
And what happens often is that people begin the process of getting permitted through the county, and they become confused, and they get frustrated, and they say, "Oh, to heck with that! I don't want to do it anyway."
Yeah.
and then they continue to sell on Facebook Marketplace or to friends and family or through their church or whatever. And and there's nothing wrong with doing that. The problem, however, is that they're unable to legitimize the business. And the thing that I try to tell people all the time is I would much rather business owners work on the business than in the business.
Yeah.
They get so consumed with the day-to-day of I got to go get stuff for my hot sauce and driving all over creation, picking these things up, and who has the best price on glass bottles and all these things, that it's really, really difficult to work on the dream because they're caught up in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
And so we try to give them the space to be able to do that and an objective opinion to be able to, because I can see things about a business because it's not my passion and my time and my money wrapped up in this business.
Yeah.
So, so that's I hope the benefit of the work that we're doing is to be able to give them that space.
Yeah, I think that's great too, right? Because sometimes that's the scary part of it, right? It's like, you know what? I opened up this this brewery because I love to make beer.
Right.
Okay, well, now you have to do accounts payable, accounts receivable. You got to hire people. You have to have, you know.
How do I do payroll?
Yeah,
right?
All that stuff, right? And it's easier sometimes. Like, you know, I'm just gonna go to the store and I'm gonna get some some peppers.
Right.
I'm just gonna make hot sauce. I don't want to deal with this shit. You know. Yeah, and so that's great. You guys kind of help to be like, no, just hold on, slow down. Right? You can do this.
Because without, what happens is people work really, really, really hard to just continue working really, really, really hard.
For sure.
And if the economy, if we're leveraging these kitchens as a vehicle for economic development, the point of it is to work really, really, really hard, and then to grow your business, to reinvest in it, to hire more folks, to work with other small business owners. Like, it becomes this ecosystem.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful about these, and I think I mentioned this actually the first time I was on the podcast, but what's beautiful about the kitchens is that all the businesses wind up supporting one another, right? Yeah. If I'm working next to you and you're a bread baker and I'm a caterer, and we're working next to each other 6 hours a day, even if it's two separate businesses, eventually I'm like, you know what? I need bread for this catering.
Yeah.
You bake bread. Like, that's an easy sell.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Do you know anybody who makes bread and they're like, what?
This bread?
Well, that's and I'm sure that they learn from each other as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think once you kind of get outside of yourself, it can be liberating, right? Because you're hard on yourself. You make excuses for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't have to really do that. Like I don't need a permit.
Nobody can talk myself in and out or out of something quite as well as I can.
I'm the best. I'm the best at it. Yeah, for sure. But so like the permits and stuff, like that's something that I can relate to. Like, because once it starts to get the paperwork and this and that, I'm like, do I even really want to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do, right? But it's just there's that barrier, and like you said, when you stop working in the business and working on the business, in my opinion, that's when when like the actual dream can happen.
Sure.
Right? Because you imagine this like, oh, this is a great hot sauce. That'd be really cool if, you know, Shaq had this on his podcast or whatever, right? And it's like, it's not possible at this point, but you grow and you work on the business and it grows.
Yeah.
Then it can be the thing that you want it to be. But
100%.
It's hard to in your mind to bridge that gap, right? Because it almost seems impossible. It's like, right? Like
so the very first step in the incubation program, that 2-year incubation program that I talked about, is we have businesses enroll what we call is a restaurant startup Bootcamp, which is a 6-week intensive course that meets once a week for 2 hours. And we go through like the basic building blocks from LLC creation to EIN, getting one of those, insurance.
Yeah. I might know a guy.
For your restaurant concern.
Bar or restaurant insurance, or bar and.
Right. But no, like, jokes aside, like I've had D'Lo come and be a guest speaker, right? About, okay, you're starting this. What do I, because something as complex as insurance, like we bring in a guest to talk about that.
Yeah.
Certainly beyond my area of expertise. But in all of those things, we talk about permitting. We bring in the head of mobile food permits for Maricopa County. And anyway, as we go through each of those, the value of that, I hope, is that while I'm kind of leading a discussion about whatever the topic of the week happens to be, if one business is struggling with permits and another business has cracked that nut, so to speak, they say, oh, yeah, we struggled with that too, and this is how we handled it, and you know what, in the end, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And so you start building this little network of people who are supporting one another, but I think the collective experience and knowledge of the group of 12 or 15 businesses like are in each one of these cohorts winds up being incredibly powerful and amplifies not only what the topic is and what I might talk about in that week, but then also their collective wisdom.
Yeah.
It's a really cool thing to see.
Yeah. I dig it, man.
Yeah.
I dig it. Well, so before, because you got a couple, I say a couple events, but it's kind of the same event.
Sure.
2-in-1 type of thing.
Sure. Right.
Before we get into that, though, what else does, because Local First is more than just the food
They
side
absolutely
of things, right?
do more than food.
You're the food.
You're
eye.
right.
That's what I would have chosen too. Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Yeah. So I absolutely deal with food. The other kind of half of our food systems piece is we have a resilient food team, resilient food systems team, which deals with farmers, ranchers, producers, aggregators, that sort of thing. So what we're trying to do in this case is bring together two pieces of the food system, which is ultimately a segue into the event that we're going to talk about in a second.
Perfect.
But we've got the entrepreneurs, right, which are the businesses that I'm dealing with in the kitchen, which are selling you and I sandwiches or hot dogs or tacos when we go to a brewery and they're popping up on a patio.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So they bring their wood-fired pizza truck up, you're having a beer, and then you go get a slice of pizza, right?
Yeah.
That business that's selling you the pizza is being incubated in our kitchens. The resilient food team's goal is to get the person who is selling you pizza to buy local Arizona produce, fruits, vegetables, wheat, flour, right? They're also centered in getting people to buy homegrown and locally made beer and wine and spirits, right?
Yeah.
So what Arizona is really phenomenal at in the food system, if you think about it from seed to the point where you put it in your mouth, we're really great at growing stuff.
Okay.
Right? Which, as someone from the Midwest, came as a surprise.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I tell the story. I moved here to run a culinary school at Central Arizona College in Maricopa, and one of the things that I sold myself on was that I could, we'll start a garden, and I'll show these kids like farm to table stuff, right? And they said, okay, great. And so they hired me, and then I was, in my first couple weeks, and my boss came to me and said, well, when are you going to start the garden? And I was like, oh, you really want me to do that?
I thought you were going to do it.
Right. That was kind of like the royal we. And so they said, well, yeah. And so they took me out behind the building where my kitchen was, and they pointed to like this patch of like dirt. And I was just like, you can't grow things here.
Yeah.
And, but that was my job, right? And so I was like, okay, right? And so I figured out, and I called the extension service at U of A, and I got all these experts, and we tilled this stuff up, and we plant, and like we grew stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it was amazing. And so that was a learning point for me that Arizona is really great at growing food, right? And the varied climate from the southern border to Utah is unbelievable.
Like the range?
Yeah, it's so cool, just like visually stunning as you drive around, but also because we have such a varied climate and things, you can grow all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So Arizona's great at that. They're also really good at taking those products and turning them into amazing food. Like we have great restaurants, we have great bars, we have great breweries, right? They're doing really cool things. The part that is that doesn't work as well and is often fractured is the in-between. Like, I'm a farmer. I've grown all this really phenomenal Swiss chard.
Yeah.
There is much less infrastructure to get it from that picked, cleaned, packaged, from that farm, stored, and then into a restaurant. And so this event is aimed at bridging that so that the people who are growing, producing, the stuff, the raw product, whether it be grass-fed beef like Harquest Hollow or someone, right, or leafy greens from Crooked Sky. Like, how do we get that stuff into the hands of people who want to eat it,
Yeah.
or process it into food in a restaurant,
Yeah.
or a food truck or whatever?
Yeah.
Right. So.
That's an easy solution, though, right?
Yeah. No, not at all, actually. It's a super complex system, and one that I think I find we have to take bit by bit by bit, right? So, I mean, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. If I look at that entire system, what happens to me, similar to someone getting a permit from the county, they become overwhelmed. They go to hell with it. I didn't want to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And if I look at it, I go, and it becomes overwhelming. And I say, well, what can one person do?
Right.
Well, this one person my dollar is my vote, so to speak. So, like, what can I do? Well, I can go to a farmer's market and I can support a business that is trying to make a difference, right? I can go to Shrubwell, right? And I can talk to Shrubwell, and they're, using local grapefruit to make their mixers.
Yeah.
And so I can buy their thing because they're using local grapefruit, right?
Yeah.
So
I like it, man.
Yeah.
And they make good stuff.
Boy, they sure do.
Yes.
Yeah, they do.
Let's take a quick break for
Sure.
a message.
We want to announce that A Taste of AZ magazine will be switching to a paid subscription starting on January 1st, 2024. Until then, you can visit us at atasteofaz.com/subscribe and name your price for the entire 2024 magazine year. You'll get 4 issues for whatever price you decide, and they will each arrive at the beginning of the quarter.
All right, we're back. And so the food system thing is that's very interesting to me, right? Because I've heard from people, I've never had to deal with it like with what we do. Like, we don't have to deal with that, but people saying, like, after COVID, like it was a challenge before. Now it can be even more, like, places that want to support local,
Sure,
but for their costs, it's not feasible sometimes.
Yeah, COVID. Wow.
Whole new podcast.
We got an hour, right?
Yeah.
COVID was, and Dilo talks about this. Like, I've had conversations with him about it. But COVID, I think, forever changed the restaurant industry. But additionally, it exposed a lot of inequities in the food system. When you would push a cart around a grocery store and you couldn't find something as simple as canned tomatoes or something, right?
Yeah.
And in my opinion, as somebody who lives, breathes, eats, and sleeps food system stuff, you pushing a cart around a Fry's in May of 2020 and not being able to find canned tomatoes, to me, is an argument for a localized food system.
Okay.
What I mean by that is, if someone is growing tomatoes here and you need canned tomatoes, then it would stand to reason that the tomatoes that are in your can of tomatoes came from a farm that is, let's say, 100 miles from here.
Yeah.
Right? Within the state of Arizona. The parts of the food system that are not working as well are, you might grow tomatoes, but there's no infrastructure to get them to a processing plant, and that if that plant exists, it hasn't been inspected by the USDA and the FDA to get the proper regulatory A-OK,
Yeah.
so that you can then sell that can of tomatoes, right? So what happens is, farmer grows tomatoes, and those tomatoes leave the state, and they go to someplace like California, or they go to someplace like Mexico. They get processed, put into a can, and then an Arizona company or any company, right, a grocery store, buys those back, and they come back to Arizona, and then you buy them in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Right? And that's bananas.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not tomatoes, bananas.
So I was looking for a joke in there.
Working on my dad jokes. My daughter's almost 2, so I'm
I
trying
saw
to
the glimmer in your
up my
eye. You're
game,
like,
right?
I'm gonna nail this one. Yeah. All right, I'm done. Let's go.
Yeah, I leave on a high note.
But no, that's true, and that's it's a really crazy system. The more I learn about the food system, I have a really good friend. One of my best friends works for SFE food service. Like they do K through 12 food, right?
Nice.
And they do. I don't know if are you familiar with SFE?
I'm not.
They do. It's basically from scratch school lunches, like school, and to hear him, and he's a little bit, he kind of, he's an exaggerator a little bit, but he tells stories. I'm like, dude, that's crazy. Like just how complicated the food system is, and the I don't know if bureaucracy is the word, or the politics that are involved in it. And he was telling me something about chocolate milk. They're looking to take chocolate milk out of schools. I said, what about regular milk? I mean, I think every nutritionist in the world will say, if you don't have to, don't consume dairy. He's like, dude, how much money is involved in keeping that milk in that school system?
In that school system,
yeah,
sure.
not a matter of, it's not a decision of, oh, hey, this is not good for it. It's like, well, probably not, but there's a lot of cash in there.
The Farm Bill has all sorts of what do they call them? Product supports, right? That lessen the cost of commodities like milk or wheat.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is based around the economics of it, and so sometimes it's cheap food at all cost, right? And when you approach the true cost of food, then you get to a place where a farmer who is a dairy farmer can actually eke out a living and is not relying on subsidies from the government in order to do that, right? But we have got ourselves wrapped around that axle, and I mean, for better or worse, that's where we're at.
Sure.
And so part of the work that we do and the advocacy that we would say about a localized food system is kind of undoing that, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes for a product, you're on a localized level, you're paying a price premium, but that's because you're paying the true cost of food, and you're paying that producer, farmer, rancher, farmer, whatever, a real living wage. So, but as a consumer, you have to be willing, and that has to be desirable.
Sure.
And so that's the push and pull, the thing that we're fighting against.
Meaning like, okay, yeah, I understand that this is a local product, but I'm not spending $4 a pound for this when I can go to this place and get it for $1.50 a pound.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's, and so at the very top, we talked about Coreless and her story, like what makes me want to pay the price premium? Because I believe in her and I believe in her product.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so Hayden Flower, right?
Yep.
Is a phenomenal example that what they're focusing on is the quality of the thing that they're making, right?
Yep.
Any of the beers that you would talk about, right? It's not Budweiser,
right?
And it's not Budweiser specifically for a reason, because they're talking about the craft of it.
Yeah.
And so that is also, in the case of something like flour, two very distinct markets, or in beer, I mean anything, right? People who are simply focused on the cheapest thing are often not focused on the highest quality thing.
For sure.
Right?
Yep.
And so for a localized food company to succeed, they have to be price competitive, but they don't have to be the cheapest thing.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
What they do have to do, and where I think local businesses excel above all others, is in the customer service and in the quality they can provide.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like, even go to any of the big box retailers and ask them for like an honest to God opinion about a stereo or a tool or a whatever. They don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you go to a small local hardware store and you say, hey, here's 2 drills, which one's better?
Yeah.
Like they can give you that customer service because they know.
For sure. Yep. I take it, man. Full circle all the way to the hardware store, man. I love it. I love it. So, okay, you guys have an event, a 2-part event coming up, right? When is the expo?
It is August 29th.
Okay.
It is from 9 to 2. It's at the Mesa Convention Center, and it is dealing with the 2 halves of the food system. So the first half of the day is an educational piece. There's 12 different speakers, 3 different tracks, so 12 different educational sessions about all sorts of concerns and topics and wins and struggles within the food system, right?
Okay.
So we've got people talking about native crops. We have people talking about food insecurity. We have people talking about water in this desert state and how we broker that so we can continue to be really good at growing things and producing things, right? And we're going to have farmers and ranchers and thought leaders and advocacy folks and anybody who is brilliant and much more eloquent about the food system than I is speaking at these various panels and discussions. And so anyone who is interested in this type of stuff, we would love to have at the event for sure.
Are there tickets? Like you
Absolutely,
buy
yes.
tickets? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And so through that goodfoodfinder.com website, you can buy a ticket to the event. And it's open to the public. And like I said, we've got people coming we have restaurateurs and we have purchasing agents from fancy resorts coming. We've got educators. We've got culinary arts students. We've got people from all over the state. Just regular folks who care about where their food comes from and want to know best practices and have a voice, right? So that's the first half of the day. That'll wind down around noon, and then our Good Food Expo, which you and Luke were part of last year, and it's where you met Coreless.
Yep.
So we're going to have about 80 different local food vendors, and that's everything from people who make hot sauce and Chow Chow to people who bake bread and make tortillas to people who raise cattle and sheep and chickens and make cheese, right? We're going to have Crow's Dairy there. We're going to have, I don't know who else. Hot Sauce and Pepper, which is a really fantastic food truck, is going to be there.
Is that the cauliflower wings?
Vegan wings? Yeah.
We didn't even get to try any. They went so quick.
Yeah, they're great.
I think I had them on the podcast. They jumped on the mic for a little bit, but
yeah. So they're now wholesaling their product, which is really cool, and I'm super happy for Tasia and AJ. Anyway, so folks like that, and that is open to anyone for sure, but particularly we're looking at getting buyers. So we have buyers from groceries, from those big resorts, and from hotels. I'd love to get your friend who does school food service.
Oh yeah,
he absolutely should be there.
Really?
Absolutely should be there.
Okay, yeah, I'll let him know.
And so anyway, and the point of the expo is to connect the two pieces, right? So it's like, I'm making this thing, whatever this thing is, right? Whether it be grass-fed beef or hot sauce or whatever, you're buying this thing. Why are we not selling it to each other?
Yeah,
Right? It's to stimulate the economy in that space that I've mentioned over and over. We're not great at.
Yeah. I do, and tickets for the expo as well. So is the whole thing ticketed? It's a ticketed thing?
Yes, they're both ticketed. You can find out about both on our website. And yeah. For food service professionals, I'd be happy to contact you and or field your questions and get some comp tickets for that piece.
What's your phone number? Just call them, text them, whatever.
You've got it. It's gonna come.
Oh yeah,
scrolling
that's
across
right.
the
Yeah,
screen.
there it is. Yeah, it will across the screen. 24/7.
That's right.
Don't hesitate. Yeah. No, I loved it. I'm so glad you invited us out last year. I don't think last year we weren't there for it, or you didn't have the speakers.
That's a great. Yeah, so so it's the Good Food Forum and Expo, which is prior to COVID, Local First did the Food and Farm Forum, which kept that same educational piece, right? What we decided is on the other side of COVID is to merge the two events. So instead of saying, well, here's, these kind of best practices and thought leaders and all that sort of thing, and then, 3, 4, 5 months later, here's this, economic and kind of retail component, wholesale component. We're putting the two things together, really, and I think it makes much more sense if we're really trying to connect those two pieces to do just that. So it's a combined event. So you're right. Last year we didn't have the forum piece of it, and this year certainly we will.
Was it the same place last year?
Mm-hmm. It's Mesa Convention Center both years. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad you invited us out. It was cool for us to meet people, made some really great connections, met some podcast guests. Justin from Arizona Restaurant Consulting.
Oh, yeah.
We
He's
developed
great.
a great relationship with him. We work with him a lot now. So it's just cool to, because we're about the story, right? We love telling the story. So to talk with all these people, and I think is it Brent or Brett from Sonoran Pasta. Yeah,
Brent.
My business partner Luke had met him before, but I had never had.
Yeah,
it's just cool to connect with people, and I'm excited for it, man.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good event.
Luke's gonna miss this year. I think he's gonna be in Hawaii or something.
Well, Mesa, Hawaii.
It's all the same. Potato, right? But my wife's going to be joining me. She's excited to come see this,
cool.
And she is a huge fan. Like if it wasn't for her, I would be eating, I'd be eating Wendy's and Crunchwrap Supremes and all this stuff. So she keeps me in line. She gets it, like, hey, organic vegetables, doing grass-fed beef. Like these things are like it's worth it. It's worth
sure.
it.
And as I matured perhaps a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. As we discussed being the same age before we started.
Class of 97 from the Midwest, right? We're
right.
Yeah.
Anyway, but like as I matured, what I noticed, and particularly as somebody who just thinks about this stuff all day long, when I eat a diet that is based around eating real, honest to God whole foods that are produced locally, I physically feel better,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
And now, and maybe this is a function of I'm 400 years old, but now when I do, I don't know what you call it, splurge, right?
Yeah.
And I eat the burrito or I eat the this or that, physically it makes me feel not great.
Yeah.
Not great.
Yeah.
Especially when you're eating things, like your wife is bringing into your home.
Yes.
Or my wife is bringing into our home.
Exactly.
Right.
We need
Because I'm like the world's oldest living teenager, and my wife is in charge.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, but you're right though. Like for years, she would say, like, how do you you just ate 2 double cheeseburgers? Like, how do you not feel? I'm like, I don't know. And then I started eating good. I'm like, I just lived feeling like crap. Like that's just what I lived. Like, that was my life.
Yeah, that was baseline.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Now I can't go back to it. I mean,
right.
I try.
Right. And here's the thing. Like, I am not here to disparage like a phenomenal cheeseburger.
Yeah.
But my thought is like, if I'm going to eat 2,000 calories in a sitting.
Yeah.
Right. Like, let's make it the best damn cheeseburger that there is.
For sure.
Right.
For sure. Yep.
Like go to Bad Jimmy's is a pop-up that does a really fantastic job, right? Or even The Stand, right, does a really good job, right?
Stand. Yeah.
And but they're working with they're still starting from that idea of with real, honest-to-God product that isn't overly processed, and it tastes better, and I feel better.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I can't move away from Kraft singles on my burger just yet.
Few can.
It's
right.
It was out of my life forever, and then we became best friends with the people across the street, our neighbors, and they. I don't remember. Like, I'm like, hey, what do you want in your burger? Something, and they were like, oh, Kraft singles. I'm like, you guys eat Kraft singles?
You're serious about that?
Yeah. My wife's like, oh my gosh. I'm like, it is so good. Like it is. She's like, it's not even real cheese. I'm like, I don't care.
It's
cheese product.
Yeah,
it
is cheese product. Yeah. No, so I every once in a while, I work with Harquist Hollow, which does really phenomenal grass-fed beef, and they'll be at the expo, and they're a speaker at the forum.
Nice.
Scott and Christy are the owners, and then the ranch and the homestead. Anyway, when I'll sell meat at a farmer's market, and the line that I use all the time with them is that in our house, we decided that if we're going to eat meat, I would rather eat better quality meat less often.
Yeah.
Right? Which helps justify, frankly, some of the inflated cost that is associated with that.
Yep.
But also, in relationship to their particular grass-fed beef, like, I know the family, and I know that I'm supporting them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And every time I put their ribeye on the grill, like, it's a step in the right direction, right? And so I mentioned kind of being overwhelmed by the scope and breadth of the work that needs to be done in the food system. Like, if I grill a ribeye from them, that's a step in the right direction, and I've done what I can in my little world, right, my little house, for that day.
For sure.
So.
For sure. Well, like you said, you vote with your dollar, right?
Yeah.
Like, so that's you putting your money towards something
That's right.
that is it's a piece of it that's helping to.
Yeah. And the hope is that if the movement continues to grow, there's a bunch of people making that one little decision, right?
For sure.
Crow's Dairy, Harquist Hollow Farms, Crooked Sky Greens, right?
Yep.
And that's not to say that like every single thing that I eat or consume has to be bought at a farmer's market, because that's not the case, right? You can support local businesses from your grocery store, right? You can go to Sprouts, which is a homegrown company, right? You can buy Duncan Family Farm. Honest to God, this happened to me last night. We made this pasta dish that had pesto in it, and we needed basil. So I went to Sprouts and I bought Duncan Family Farm's basil, right?
Yeah.
And so I did the easy thing by going to the grocery store, but because it was Sunday evening and the farmers markets aren't open and all that, right? But you can still make those small little, right? And that was, I don't know, a $4 package of basil.
Yeah.
But that was $4 that are then reinvested with that company in Arizona and stays here.
I dig it, man.
Yeah.
I dig it. Well, before we wrap this up, I'm trying to get more recommendations from people. Hear where people like to eat. Like, where do you, and no health, so we already threw out the stand. So we're not, there's not a health requirement for this. This can be whatever you want, Gabe.
Sure.
But has there been any places that, like, what are some of your favorites recently? I mean, I know you got a 2-year-old, so you
I have a
probably don't go
2-year-old, so I haven't been out of the house in, I don't know, 2 years. So we have a couple's friends that we love dearly, and they're always inviting us to, like, let's go to happy hour. Like, they wanted to make dinner reservations a couple weeks ago, like 8 o'clock at night. And I'm like, 8? What is it? I might as well be tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Like, breakfast?
I have a 2-year-old. Go to dinner at 8 o'clock. Yeah, sure. Let's see. We went for our anniversary. We went to Bacanora, which was unbelievable.
Yeah.
We went for brunch because we have a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But my mother-in-law was kind enough to watch her.
Nice.
So Bacanora is always amazing. What else? We recently opened up a kitchen in Maryvale at 37th Avenue and Thomas. And so myself and my team have been exploring the delights of Maryvale.
Yeah.
Ta Carbone, which is at 43rd Avenue and Indian School, is the best carne asada taco I have ever eaten in my entire life.
What's it called?
Ta Carbone.
Ta Carbone. Okay.
It is like they grill everything over hickory indoors. They have this huge hood. It is phenomenal.
That's why I asked these questions.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah, that's on my list now too. Yeah.
When I moved here, people are like, carne asada, carne asada, carne asada. I'm like, it's a steak taco. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I didn't until it's so good.
Well, what makes a carne asada beyond, is it seasoning?
It's the seasoning,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
And then I think that they're really honest to God doing it over a wood fire grill.
Yeah.
And it's busy.
Yeah.
And they got a weird system, man.
Really?
There's all sorts of, like, you go up and they take your name and they put the check up and the cooks start cooking your thing and they shout it out. But you don't pay, which I couldn't understand until I went with a coworker of mine and I said, well, what's the deal? Or like at the end, he's like, they do that because they know that you're going to get more. So you don't pay at the counter. They keep your shit. You start your tab. That's exactly right. It's like the bar of tacos.
Yeah.
And so like
brilliant.
you get whatever 3, 4, 5 tacos, and then you're like, I could have another 2, couldn't I?
Yeah.
And then you go back up.
Yeah.
Like that's how they get you.
So you'll hold your card out, and they're like, "Hold on."
You just keep that, friend.
Keep that. Yeah. Gonna need that later. What's your credit limit? Yeah.
Right.
Ah, man. Okay, that's on my list for sure. Then that's great recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
And Bacanora is one that's on my list of must hit places.
Have you not been there?
No.
Oh,
I know.
So and I got this tip from another one of my coworkers, who actually worked with Chef Renee for a long time, and she said, because I gave her this dilemma of, we got a 2-year-old and we can't really go out to dinner, we can't go to fancy dinner, right?
Must be nice.
Right, must be right. Sun's down, I have to be at home.
Yeah.
So, anyway, she said, go for brunch. the reservations are super hard to get, and so if you show up, they open I think 11 for brunch. So you show up at like 10:30. You grab a cup of fancy coffee from the place next door, and you hang out. And the menus are pretty close. They're nearly identical.
Yeah.
But
I'm down for brunch, dude.
you know what I'm saying.
I mean, there's eggs. They got eggs.
There's eggs.
I'm in. Right?
There's tortillas. There's there's grilled meats.
Yeah.
There's beans.
I'm in, man.
Yeah.
I'm in.
So.
Well, awesome, dude. Gabe, thanks for jumping on the mics, man.
Thanks for asking me to do it.
Always good seeing you, dude. Really excited for this expo and the forum. So that is, once again, August 29th.
August 29th from 9 to 2, Mesa Convention Center. All the information is on our website, goodfoodfinder.com.
Excellent. Yeah. Dude, keep up the good work, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome, buddy.